Hey everybody, welcome to the Insight Cafe. My name is 𝗕𝗁, and today I have a real special guest. His name is Dr. Bill Pettit. He is a retired clinical psychologist with a long and glorious history of work and impact, and he's a renowned teacher and mentor in the Three Principles community. I would read the bio, but that would be our podcast. So I'm going to put it in the descriptions, but I'll tell you what Dr. Bill Pettit means to me is we met on 𝗕𝗶𝗶𝗁 Academy the first time we met. And I'm still reflect an impact on just your kindness and gentleness of the feeling of your words. And you're the first person who really helped me to connect, I think, our mental physiology to the mind, consciousness, and thought connection, to see how our thinking affects our physiology. And that's why I brought you on here today, because I really want to explore this topic of why do we break down mentally? What is it about our psychology that has that effect on our body? So without further ado, welcome to the show.
Well, it's wonderful to be here, 𝗕𝗁. It really is. Yeah. By the way, I'm not a clinical psychologist and never was. I'm a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist, sorry.
And the difference, of course, is that as a psychiatrist, I'm a physician first, I was a medical doctor. As I shared with you, I trained in surgery for 2 years before I ever went into psychiatry. And with a wonderful man from Bangkok, Thailand.
Right.
But so a psychiatrist is a physician who chooses that area as his specialty, just like he could choose to be a orthopedic doctor or a gynecologist or a pediatrician or so yeah.
Thank you for correcting me. And that makes it even more important because I imagine you've seen in the field just how impactful or that thought connection to our bodies. Because I remember on 𝗕𝗶𝗶𝗁 Academy, I loved hearing your stories about your cases. So I think a good place for us to start is just to explore that question. Why do we mentally break down? What is it about our bodies that are wired to react to our thinking?
Well, that's a huge question. But the way you ask it, why are we wired to break down, is kind of like the guy being asked on the witness stand, have you stopped beating your wife? It's like, yes, no, neither answer is a good one.
Right.
So when I don't see us, 𝗕𝗁, as wired to break down, I see us as let me make what could sound like a revolutionary statement and then see if I can show the logic of it. The thing that we call breakdowns and symptoms, psychological and physiological, I see as love letters. I didn't always see it that way. Let me stop me. And I'm glad to have this feel more like an interview than any presentation. So stop me at any time or make, and so have you heard me talk about this before? Or
yeah, I have.
See, it changes things because have you heard me quote Dr. 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹?
Not yet.
He was the psychiatrist and the director of the National Institute of Mental Health in the United States from 2005 to 2017. And he would see the answer different than I, and he's certainly on the list of one of the people that I want to share our recently published article. And and be in contact with. But I want you to hear what most people would think is a pretty revolutionary thing for the director of the National Institute of Mental Health in the United States for almost 13 years. Here's what he was quoted as saying, and I've seen it in a book and in 2 or 3 places. We are so embedded in this structure. We have spent so much time diagnosing mental disorders that we actually believe they are real. Now there's something there, but to call it okay, but there's no reality. These are just constructs. There's no reality to schizophrenia or depression. We might have to stop using terms like depression and schizophrenia because they are getting in our way and confusing things. Wow.
Wow.
I mean, does that sound like a wow to you or not?
Yeah, that sounds revolutionary.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Stay with me here. Whatever we've been doing for 5 decades, it ain't working. When I look at the numbers of suicides, this is Dr. Insel, not me. When I look at the numbers of suicides, the number of disabilities, the mortality data, it's abysmal, and it's not getting any better.
Mm.
All the ways in which we've approached these illnesses, and with a lot of people working very hard, the outcomes we've got to this point are pretty bleak.
Wow.
Wow. So it's almost like we have to start from scratch.
Mm.
Have you, are you familiar with a man named Thomas Kuhn, K-U-H-N, who
No.
wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions?
I haven't heard of it.
Every time, it's a little blue book. I think you'd enjoy the read from my contact with you. He goes over every scientific revolution that has occurred. And typically it takes nearly 50 years because the diehards have to die off. And enough of the young people are inquisitive to really, really look at the data and see that the new paradigm, whether it's Einstein's theory of relativity or the fellow that Faraday and electricity or 𝗕𝗲𝘁𝘂𝗁 and oxygen or whatever the breakthrough was, it takes people who are willing to at least be open to a new paradigm that answers the questions that the old one did not. Our paradigm in in our understanding of what is mental well-being and the nature of it is in peril. As Dr. Insel, people know that because things are not getting better. In fact, another, and I hope this is okay. I may be, but to the people that are listening, I may be bouncing around a little bit, but just kind of, if you need to make a note or something, I'm going to bring it together. I want to mention another book. Have you heard me mention this book?
Not
The
yet.
Anatomy of an Epidemic.
Not yet.
Okay, Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker, author of Mad in America. Anatomy of an Epidemic, Magic Bullets, Psychiatric Drugs, and the Astonishing Rise of Mental Illness in America. Now, Robert Whitaker is not one of those people that's just out to get psychiatry. He's not. He's an investigative, prize-winning investigative journalist who started to see things that got him inquisitive, and he went to the basement of the Harvard Medical School library and started rooting around. And what he found was, as he started to put it together, I happen to have lived through the expansion of psychotropic medications. Okay. So for the last 60 years, 60, 70 years, psychiatric medications have become more and more involved in psychiatric care. If Sid Banks was here and somebody was having terrible panic attacks and they'd been prescribed a medicine for it, and they somehow thought that he would think that they shouldn't take a pill, he would say to the person, and was quoted as, at least on more than on one occasion, saying to the person that I know, "Dearie, that pill is God too." There is nothing in the form that isn't divine energy in a disguise. Now, that being said, how we use something and our ability to understand it and use it in a wise way can depend on whether we kill ourselves with something or give ourselves a chance to learn something. You don't give I know people who can take a power saw and make a big chunk of ice look like a quartet singing, or take an old log and have suddenly a bear appear out of the log. But there's a reason you don't give a power saw to a 5-year-old, because they probably would not survive very long if you did. So as a practicing psychiatrist, in the last 35 years, I've been retired now about 2 years, but in the last 35 years of my practice as a clinical psychiatrist, I use medications, but I use them in a very different way than I had before, and from a very different level of understanding. If somebody was so panicky that they were having panic attacks 3 or 4 times a day, where they were having trouble breathing and shaking and nauseated and lightheaded and frightened, then I surprised people by my willingness to give very high doses of medications to help that person as quickly as possible get to a place of calm where they could then listen. If somebody is so frightened by their hallucinations that are telling them that they're going to kill them or that they should kill themselves, and they don't know that hallucination is just a thought with special effects. First time I said that to somebody, I myself was surprised, but I thought that's true. That's all an hallucination is. We as human beings cannot, Nikan, experience anything that isn't thought-created experience. I'll give you an example from last night. I came in from riding my bike. I went on just a short 13 or 14-minute bike ride. And I don't think I was dehydrated or anything, but there's a lemon tree in my backyard that they must have had to cut one of its major limbs off at kind of the base. It must have been interfering with things. And when I looked at that, as the light was hitting it, I thought initially what I saw was an owl, an animal. I saw an owl looking at me. And I kind of backed up a little bit, like, could an owl be, is it caught in there? And then I just got really quiet and I saw that it wasn't an owl. But my eyes were fine. My eyes were seeing something, but I was, with the power of thought, then creating an owl. Have you ever seen something and then once you got, it wasn't what you thought it was?
All the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where this is really practical is that when people are in a stress state of mind, they're more apt to access to in that environment, to more likely to access that primitive through the brain, use the power of thought, because it needs to happen quickly. It happens quickly, but it's not very accurate. And that's why if a policeman is really in a stressful state of mind, and some people would say but I know policemen that learned the principles that lived and did their work not in a stressful state of mind 99% of the time, that in a stressful state of mind, a person is trying to show that they have an iPhone, and the policeman sees a revolver and puts 5 bullets in the person's chest.
Just through thought created, and yeah.
So and again, I know this is bouncing around, but let me give another example. I have a good friend, by the way, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a free, and feel free to just tell me what to send. There's a free course online, and it's on YouTube, and it's on my website, our website. And it's called The Missing Link for Veterans. You're familiar with the book,
right.
by
Yes.
are you familiar with that course?
No, but now that you mention it, I'll put it in the description. Yeah.
Well, and I'll be glad to, it's for free. It's the Missing Link for Veterans, www.missinglinkforveterans.com, I think. And in that course, there's 3 veterans, one from the United Kingdom, one from the United States, and one from Israel, all 3 combat veterans. Okay. And one of them is 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹, who I met in 2008 when I was in Israel for 13 days with Rabbi Chaim Levine. And we started with a weekend where we had 27 combat injured soldiers with PTSD. And we spent a weekend with them. And then I worked over the next 13 days with many of them individually. And that organization called BFL, Brothers for Life, now has over 1,100 members.
Wow.
Started with 27. They have a huge building in Tel Aviv from benefactors. But 𝗕𝗶𝗹 was one of a company of 10 that were hit with a rocket attack in the Second Lebanon War. He was the medic, and he cared for them one by one as they died in his arms, all 9 of his colleagues, as his left eyeball was hanging out by the cord that holds your eye in. Understandably, he went into a deep depression and PTSD and kind of closed himself in a basement, trying to minimize his exposure to any sensory input. And but I met him in 2008. He started to look in the direction of the principles. He's now a licensed psychologist who works with veterans with PTSD, and he's in a 2-year fellowship in child and adolescent psychology. And he's on this course that we did called Missing Link for Veterans, where we go through the missing link 1 page at a time. And those 3 veterans, myself and Judy Sedgman, a colleague of 35 plus years, we have the option to comment, all 5 of us, after each one of the 142 pages of what that page what the content has elicited from us through the years. Well, 𝗕𝗶𝗹 came one time to our session to record, and he said, I had an experience this weekend which really deepened, I don't know if he said it deepened his understanding, but it allowed him to see the level of understanding that he had come to. And he and 2 of his buddies decided to go from Tel Aviv, Israel to Barcelona Spain for a weekend holiday. And they arrived and they walked outside of the airport, and they had not realized that it was a national holiday in Spain. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And so as they walked out, what do you think they walked out to?
Fireworks and noise and
Huge fireworks, explosions in the air, bursting fireworks, explosions. That part of the brain that I told you about that's unconscious, not conscious, was triggered as a protective measure. That part of the brain, very fast but inaccurate, was saying basically, oh my God, another rocket attack. And suddenly his heart was going at 160. He was having trouble breathing. He was diaphoresing. He was sweating profusely. And at that point, Nikon, a lot of people would have been terrified by the response of their body. Would they not?
Yeah, I
And
would.
they'd be trying to change it some way. True?
True.
They'd be doing battle with their thinking or whatever, or trying to reframe or think about being on a beach or some damn thing, right?
Yeah.
But because 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 had come to know that the only experience I can have is a thought-created experience, conscious or unconscious, and that if it's not fed, the physiology will last without being fed is 4 to 5 minutes because of the half-life of norepinephrine and stuff is very short. So he said, I knew the only thing I didn't even think about it. I knew enough. All I had to do was to sit down. All I had to do was to sit down. So he sat down on the curb. He did not try to do anything. He just got present. He just got present. People ask me, the other day, somebody asked me, what do you do when you have a thought thunderstorm? I said, well, what came out of my mouth was the following, and it's what 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 did. I do the best that I can to be where I am. I do the best that I can to be where I am. 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 sat quietly, and within 5 minutes, he said, he told the rest of us as we're recording, within 5 minutes, my pulse was normal. My breathing was normal. I was no longer perspiring. And I felt a deep level of calm. And then from that place, I looked up at the fireworks and I said to my buddies, is this cool or what? And they went off to have a wonderful weekend in Barcelona.
That's profound.
They didn't have to catch their next flight back to Tel Aviv. If he had not had that understanding, he could have gotten into fear and it would have just escalated further. His physical would have been set louder and louder alarms, and he didn't see them as alarms to just stop and sit. He would have mentally, and they would have carried him off, probably curled up in a fetal position as he was mumbling, they're all dead, they're all dead, I couldn't save them, they're all dead, to the local psychiatric hospital. But as it was, within 5 minutes, because you see, Nikon, and then I felt like you had something to say. I'm just going to finish my thought. And then mental well-being to me is like a good-sized cork. If I had a good-sized cork, as whatever you vision as a good-sized cork, I could push it under the water and hold it under the water. But it's not going to be easy because the cork's home is on the surface. So it's going to be tiring, exhausting, and eventually painful to hold the cork underwater. But as soon as I would let go of the cork does not need a GPS to find its way home to the surface. It goes there very quickly. And 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 knew that. He knew that. Didn't believe it. There's difference between believing something cognitively and knowing something. So I want to finish my thought about the anatomy of an epidemic, but I wanted to give you a chance to, if you had something.
Oh, I think just I love your stories and the way you tell them, and what I in reflecting from your story and my original questions, why we break down mentally, and in your story I see that it's not that we're wired to break down, it's just part of the system, warning system. Like you said, love letters, it's just a helpful navigation that you're off balance. And in reflecting to the doctor that you quoted in the beginning of our talk about how the labels aren't helpful, like you aren't suffering from depression, you like, or psychosis, like that, those just keep you stuck, but they're just really helpful descriptions that we found to, like, oh, this is where your mind's at. It's not who you are as an identity. And I think when you really get that, like I just saw that, because I get insecure all the time. I get insecure and anxiety, and I dip into depression sometimes, or like suicidal ideation. And the biggest revelation for me since knowing you has been to be less afraid of it and more of just, oh, that's where you're a little off today, 𝗕𝗂𝘁. Like I think you're trying to push the cork underwater, and it's been so helpful to not have to overreact or trying to fix it and just notice it. Yeah, that's my reflection.
No, that's really beautiful, because when you said it, you just notice it, then you're more like 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹, aren't you? You just get as quiet as you be where you are. I mean, I used to say things like, but I think they were not helpful. I used to say things, well, you just have to pay less attention to your thinking. Well, how do you do that?
Yeah, how do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, but if you tell people, listen, as best as you can, just get present in your life. Just be where you are, like you said. Just let me do as best as I can to be where I am. Then you can't be present and in your thoughts at the same time.
I'm going to repeat that. That was so good. You can't be present and in your thoughts at the same time.
Right.
And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because even me and my friends or my clients, like I would be sitting in a room that I'm safe and I'm secure, but because my mind's gone off the deep end somewhere, or working overtime to push this cork down, I would be terrified or in tears or in fetal positions. And it was just so fascinating to me that and we had this before we started recording it. Even though I know this, I still buy into the special effects machine that is my thinking.
See, this is hard for people, I think, but what if you just have to admit that you don't know it?
Yeah.
Now here's the deal. You know a lot. Wouldn't you say that since you've been introduced to the principles that your life has gotten gentler?
Yeah, it has.
What, 5%, 10%, 20%? What would you say?
I'll take 10%.
Okay, 10%, but it has moved in the right direction.
Right.
Okay, so one of the things Mr. Banks has said, and we're not even obviously discussing what the three principles are, and there's plenty of materials. The missing link, for instance, would be a wonderful place, but once you learn how to ride a bike, You know how to ride a bike.
Mhm.
It's hard. It'd be hard if somebody said, now for this, you're making a movie, you've got to pretend like you don't know how to ride a bike and crash it. Very hard to do because you know how to ride a bike.
Mm.
If you know how to swim, it is very hard to jump in the water and pretend like you don't know how to swim, because you know how to swim. You know how to support yourself in the water. Once you learn how to add, you may make a mistake in addition occasionally, but you know how to add.
Mm.
This is different, Nikon. Mr. Banks says it this way. He says, you know, there are an infinite number of doors of understanding of these principles of universal mind, universal thought, universal consciousness, which is a metaphor for what he saw in his 3-day experience that culminated when he said, I'm home free. I've conquered this world. I've seen what people call God is. I've seen what life is. And I've seen how the two are connected. Wow. And at that moment, he told his wife, now here he is, you know that story. I'm sure you've listened to it on the Long Beach lectures where he describes, where he said then to his wife, he said, you know, he said, do you know what this means? Now she's looking at a welder, a 43-year-old welder who's worked at the pulp mill for 14 years and has been on a 1-week holiday and is going back to the pulp mill on Monday. And he just said what he said. And she's thinking, oh my God, he's gone crazy.
Yeah.
But she had calm enough that she said to Sid, what does it mean, Sid? And do you remember what Sid said to her? 3 things?
No, I don't remember.
Doesn't matter. It's okay. I've been doing this 38 years, right? Sid, and 26 of them I was mentored by Sid directly, you know. Sid said to her, he said 3 things at least. Number 1, he said, I'm going to be writing books. Now he is a welder with a 9th grade education.
Mm.
He wrote 10 books, 6 of which were published, 4 manuscripts are with his widow. The 6 books are not about welding. They're profound, powerful books that every time I read any one of them, I see things that I never saw before.
Mm.
Number 2, he said, psychiatrists and psychologists are going to seek me out from all over. And they're going to ask me to teach them what I've seen. And together with them and those that learn from them, there will be millions and millions of people that will regain their mental well-being that's innate and inborn and can't be scratched, can't be broken.
Yeah.
Number 3, he said to her, honey, you and I are going to be traveling. She said, why is that, Sid? She said, because I'm going to be asked to speak at colleges and universities. This welder with a 9th grade education. I'm going to be asked to speak at colleges and universities, not only in Canada, where they were living, but throughout the United States and eventually in Europe. And Nikon, that all became true. I taught at West Virginia University Medical School for 10 years with Judy Sedgman at the Sydney Banks Institute for Innate Health. And he was twice nominated. Sid Banks was twice nominated for the Sir John Templeton International Spirituality Prize. which is twice that of the Nobel Prize. It's $2 million. Now, he
Wow.
didn't win it, but he was twice nominated for that. So when people even say, how do I know this isn't a cult or something? I just have to shake my head, because it took us 27 years to convince Sid to even allow himself to be videotaped, because he didn't want followers.
Right.
So back to my point, this is different from learning how to ride a bike. And the way it's come for me in my winding journey of 38 years of incremental realizations is that whenever I experience emotional pain, I get a little excited.
That was, I think, the one thing that stood out about you from all the teachers is you're the only person who says that. Oh, I have to talk to Dr. Pettit about it, because when I experience emotional pain, I curl up in a ball and cry, and you get excited. So I want to know what makes you excited?
Why do I get excited? Huh? Right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking? Why do I get excited?
Yeah, what and because it's so kind of foreign to what you would use, how one would usually react to emotional pain.
Right. Because there was a time in my life, and well, I've told you, and I've told people that I went in and out of clinical depression for 21 years.
Right. Even after as a psychiatrist.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I saw 6 psychiatrists, was treated by 6 psychiatrists. They were wonderful people. They were caring people, and they helped me through time in college, time in medical school, time in residency, time afterwards. They helped me through periods that allowed me to make it through without having to stop my education or be hospitalized. They tried me on a couple of medicines. I didn't find them helpful, or I get reactions, but they helped me. They were good people. But not one of them knew what Sid Banks knew. You know, just recently, and a few months ago, in the American Journal of Psychiatry, there was a published article on a survey given to filled out by 2016 American psychiatrists, and it was the burnout scale, one of the valid burnout scales. And my heart goes out to the humility and to the honesty of those 2016. 78% of the psychiatrists met criteria for burnout: emotional, spiritual, psychological, and physiological burnout. Many of them had significant physical symptoms because they're connected.
Yeah.
Now, Nikon, there's no judgment here. My heart goes out to them, because that was me 38 years ago. That was me going to the office every day and struggling with feelings of severe depression and intermittent suicidal thoughts, because I did not understand that behind life was pure love and understanding. And that was the default setting. And I didn't understand in answer to your question, why do I get excited? You know, I may not have this accurate, but I had a wonderful Chinese, and still do, he's a Chinese American physician who shared with me that as I recall it, the symbol in Chinese is something like this, that I may be, in somebody with Chinese knowledge, but one of these is the symbol for a crisis. One of these symbols is danger. The other one is opportunity.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a crisis, when I'm in emotional pain, it's a crisis. I can either experience it as dangerous or as an opportunity. And what I know, because of what I don't believe, because there was a time that I believed it, but now I know it. I know that the only person, place, or thing that can create emotional pain for Bill Pettit is in the same underpants that I'm in.
Quotable.
And the last time I looked, there's only room for me. So when I feel emotional pain, it's so wonderful. I don't have to look out there at all. Number one, I don't have to look out there to try to change something that I probably have no control over changing, some circumstance, the pandemic, et cetera, what people say, what people do, what's happened to my finances, what's happened to my, no. And the wonderful thing is, I don't even have to look to do anything with me, except to do the best I can to be where I am. That's all I have to do. We want our intellect, we want to make it more complicated. When Sid says when the answers are complicated, it's the intellect. When the answers are simple, it's the spirit. So I have found that all I have to do is do the best I can to be where I am, to go from fast and furious to calm and curious. But there's no mechanism for that. All I have to do to have that occur with my thinking is to do the best that I can to be where I am. And even if when I get to where I am and my brain wants to rate that I'm at about a 3 out of 10, do you know what I'm talking about? Then I have a choice to either bitch and moan that I'm only at a 3 out of 10. The great Bill Pettit is at a 3 out of 10. Shit, I hope nobody finds out. Or to say, you know what? Okay, there's a big opportunity here. I'm going to be the best darn 3 I can be. Before I know it, I'm a 4, and then a 5,
and a 5 and a 6.
Because the cork knows its way home, Nikon.
Yeah.
I don't have to grab the cork and try to pull this heavy cork to the surface. All I have to do is grab onto it as it goes.
I love that. I haven't heard that before. I wanted to ask if you could, this is my favorite story that you tell that I think would beautifully illustrate everything you just shared. And I believe it's a story about a young lady who came to you who had psychosis, who had dropped out of university. And it's your story, but I think the way it goes is you told her that she was fine and she thought you were crazy.
Yeah, there's 2 different stories there. Well, yeah, maybe it's the one. This was 1984, and it's interesting. During the pandemic, her mother, who has to be in her early 80s, recontacted me after 30, just looking through something and seeing she was going through her address book or something, and she saw my name. And after from 1984, what is that? 37 years. Or 2020, I guess, 36 years. She found a way to contact me to say, I am so grateful.
Wow. So
yeah,
so just to give context, like what happened, I'd love for you to tell the story. Just it's my favorite story.
Well, the preface of it is that when I got drafted in Vietnam during the Vietnam era, after I left the surgical residency, I trained for 6 months and then was a general physician for a squadron of Navy pilots, anti-submarine helicopter Navy pilots. for 2.5 years for them and to some degree their families. And that's when I got into a deeper understanding of mental stress and its physical manifestation as alarms, as wake-up calls, as love letters eventually. But so my commanding officer said I was the best flight surgeon he'd had out of 25 in his 35-year career. He'd had 25 flight surgeons, and he said, "You're the best one." And God, this is long before I met Sid, and I thought, gosh, anyway, but I did the best I could, and so he appreciated it. Well, so on my late wife and my way down to study with Dr. Roger Mills and Rick Suarez and Dr. 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 in 1984, we stopped in the Northeast, and my friend who had been my commanding officer said to me, "You're telling me this is a breakthrough in the field of mental health, equivalent to Einstein's breakthrough in physics in 1905, 1905 papers?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And there's no doubt in my mind, Frank. Okay. So I'm down there, and I start in August, and about March, about 6 months later, 5 months later, I get a call from this mother and father who say that their 23-year-old daughter has for 4.5 years been unable to function, that she had gotten accepted at a Ivy League school, which you don't get accepted unless you're pretty damn bright. And within 6 months, she was unable to function. And for the last 4.5 years, she's been in and out of hospitals at Mass General under Harvard, and that she'd been unable to work or go to school or do a job. And that she had for the last, I forget, 2.5 years, had been being seen every single day during the week, Monday through Friday, in a session by a Harvard psychiatrist, and then had been sent to Arizona or somewhere to be under care for 7 months, and she just got worse and worse and worse. And that she had been unable to read a newspaper now for over 2.5 years, et cetera, et cetera. So I asked if I could have her come down and see me for 2 weeks. and they said, "No, we're not going to do that. I told my cousin that I would call you because he was adamant about me calling you." And I said, "Okay." But I said, "Here's the deal. I'd like to talk to this woman. We'll call her, I'm going to call her, I'll goof anyway, and she'd be fine. Her name was Sarah." I said, so I called Sarah, and I talked to her on the phone, so I called them back, and I said, "Wait, Sarah, would you be willing to come down and see me for 2 weeks?" She said, "Well, doctor, how about 1 week?" And I started laughing, and she said, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "Sarah, we're going to try to accomplish in 2 weeks what hasn't been accomplished in 4.5 years. Do you think, well, okay, yeah, I'd do it." So I called the parents back, and I said, "Listen, your daughter laughed at my jokes. So she's got good mental health." and I said, "No," but I said, "Here's the deal. Either I'm a charlatan that's going to take a couple of $1,000s from you, or I've got penicillin, and the other doctors don't have penicillin." They gave me 8.5 days.
He gave you 8.5 days.
8.5. They came on a Tuesday evening, and there's a nurse that was with me, because she said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do." but I do know that I know something that she doesn't know, and I'm going to share it. We had no books then. There were no books, Nikon. There were no tapes.
No
There
tapes,
was
nothing.
nothing,
Wow.
nothing.
Nothing.
So she was so frightened that she would not even come into my office. I was renting from a semi-retired surgeon in the evenings. I was renting his office. And so she sat with her mother, and she was shaking like a frightened animal.
Mm.
And I asked the nurse if she would get us some sodas. And so we talked out in the waiting room, which couldn't even come in. And she was like a frightened animal. She was shaking like this. Okay. She hadn't been able to read anything for a long time. She hadn't been able to hold a thought for more than a minute or less than a minute or so. And so after 3.5 days, I think the mother saw something happening. I would see her in the morning with her mother. I'd see her, let's see, because of a lesson that I learned, I tried to include her mother. So I'd see her with her mother, and then one time I'd see if her mother had anything for a few minutes, and then I'd just see her. And so on Monday, they wanted me to continue over the weekend, and I said, no, I'm going to go to the beach with my family here. I've got children. And so Monday comes, I said, I'm going to ask you to see a woman teacher at where I'm learning this. Her name is Darlene Stewart. And I would love to go have coffee with your mother. Now, you wouldn't do that in a normal therapy situation, right? But she was fine with it because she knew that, number one, we really hadn't talked about her problem. I figured, I had psychiatrists say, well, what was her problem? I said, well, she'd been talking about her problem for 4.5 years, and it didn't seem like it was doing very well. So I didn't talk about her problem.
Yeah.
I wasn't interested. I was interested in the solution, which was peace of mind, period. Always the solution.
Period.
Period.
Love that. Yeah.
So we went to have, and so she was fine. She said, no, doctor, I trust you. So we went to have coffee. This is Monday morning after 3.5 days. And I got the coffee. We sat down, and I said, we'll call her Martha. I said, Martha, how are things? And tears started streaming down her cheeks. Her mother. She said, Dr. Pettit, there's a miracle happening, and I don't understand what's going on. Yeah. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, she put on makeup for the first time in 4.5 years last night, and we went out to eat in a public place. She hasn't done that for 4.5 years.
Wow.
She's had a friend whose mother died she had a friend whose mother had died about 10 days ago. And I've been very busy getting ready for this. She's been trying to get me to sit down and write a letter for her, and I just didn't get it done. Last night, she came and showed me a beautiful 3-page letter.
Wow.
That she'd written. She hasn't been able to read a newspaper for 2.5 years. She's on her second novel since we've been here. So that next week, Tuesday afternoon, I said, where's your mom? Because in the afternoon, her mom would usually come. She said, well, she's picking up my dad at the airport. And I thought, I can imagine the phone call. Get your ass down here.
Right now. Yeah.
I don't think he's giving her drugs or anything.
Yeah.
But I don't know. These people had been through hell.
Yeah.
For what? From a place that was known as the Mecca of mental health treatment in the United States, one of the Meccas, at least. And so I spent the last 3 days with her. I'd always see her for 5 minutes at first to make sure there was anything she wanted to talk about. But then I spent the last 3 days with 3 of them. Right. So she leaves. We're supposed to meet for 4 times for half an hour afterwards. I don't think we did, because she contacted me the following Monday or 8 days later. And she said, Dr. Pettit, I got a problem. I said, what's your problem? She said, well, I didn't tell you, but I stopped the Mellaril. And then the last day I stopped the Xanax. And I'm only on Dalmane for sleep, 30 milligrams. When she came, she was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night. She said, I'm sleeping 10 to 12, 13 hours a night, and I'm waking up groggy. Why do you think that was, Nikan? Why is she sleeping now? She's taking the Dalmane, but she was sleeping 4 hours. Now she's sleeping 12 or 13.
There's less on her mind. Like it's just
because she's not dysregulating chemistry in her body with 8 to 12 hours of worry, guilt, resentment, upset, overanalysis, unresolved grief. She's not activating the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the stress response through stressful thinking. So her body has a chance to really, the Dalmane has now become a poison. It was what was giving her a little bit of sleep before. So I said, what do you think you should do? She said, well, I've got some 15s. I thought maybe I'd switch that I used to be on before I had to go up to the 30s. I thought maybe I'd go down to the 15s. I said, brilliant. In 6 weeks, she was off all medication.
Wow.
In 3 weeks, she got a job as a lifeguard at the local swimming pool. She got recertified, which she had been when she was 18, but she at 23 now, she got recertified. In the fall, she took a job teaching men's cross country at a college outside of Boston. And for the first time instituted a women's cross country team.
Wow.
The following year, she came down and saw me. I've got her on videotape, which I need to get transferred into digitally. And she came down to see me before she went to college for a couple of days. And she graduated in 4 years with a 4.0 grade point average, majoring in mathematics.
Wow. Coming from,
And then went to graduate school in downtown New York City,
Yeah.
walking around in New York City for 2 years in graduate school. She's married. She's got 4 beautiful children. She's,
Gosh, I think that what I love most about that story, it perfectly encapsulates, it just talks about everything that we've been talking about. Just the sheer possibility of peace of mind and learning how the mind works through the mind, consciousness, and thought. It's incredible. And it's always helpful to me. It makes me reflect on my anxiety too. It's like, well, I don't have it that bad. And you're like, maybe I need to give myself a break, you know?
Well, the one thing I would like to do before we stop today, and I don't know how much longer we want
we got
to go,
a
but
couple minutes to go.
The one thing I'd like to do is to make the differentiation, which I know, sure you've heard before, but you never know when you're going to hear something fresh, huh? Every human mind has direct access to its experience here on Earth. And the human mind always has access to its own spiritual, let's see, what did I do with my, oh, you're there. To its own spiritual roots from which it came, formless root. The universal mind or the impersonal mind is constant and unchangeable. The personal mind is in a perpetual state of change. We have a personal use. There's only one mind. There's one main computer, if you will, but we get to use it. Its power. All humans, all is a big word, Nikan. There's no exceptions here. It doesn't say except for Nikan or except for Sarah.
Except for Bill.
Except for Bill. I tell people, I'm sorry, you don't get to be special.
Well, that's what Michael Neal meant. Okay, God, he used to say that. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, okay, now I get it.
You don't get to be the exception. You don't get to be special. All humans have the inner ability to synchronize their personal mind with their impersonal mind to bring harmony into their lives.
Mm.
Some believe the brain and the mind are the same. And there's even some people in the Three Principles community that say that's what the mind does. No, that's, pardon me, but that's nonsense.
Mm.
The mind doesn't do, that's what they're just, and then they describe what the brain does. What the mind does is what we do with this power of mind. This is our mind, like Sid says. Whose mind is it? It's yours.
Right.
The brain, there has to be a power behind the brain to make it function. Some believe the brain and the mind are the same, but there has to be a power behind the brain to make it function. The brain and the mind are two entirely different things. The brain is biological, the mind is spiritual. The brain acts like a computer. Whatever you put in is all you get out, like 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹, right? This is logic. An important thing to realize is that universal mind and personal mind are not two minds thinking differently, but two ways of using the same mind. There's only universal mind. And we're either using it in a personal way or we're listening to universal mind.
It's profound.
My lemon tree in the backyard only has the choice of listening to universal mind. I have the choice not to.
I remember I said this to a group of monks a couple days ago, and it's a quote by Jack Pransky, and he said, you know, all we really are is love, peace, and harmony, and the power to create the illusion that we're not. And it's so helpful to know that.
If we truly know it, even
Yeah.
if we don't know it yet, if we look in that direction.
Yeah.
And that the reason that that's true is the oneness of life. 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 speak of it. Hawkins speak of Einstein. There is nothing in this world that isn't the same divine energy in a different. Now, some people won't call it. You don't have to call it divine. I had a couple that said, we don't like the word divine. I said, what do you like? They said, we like the word Jack. I said, fine, then it's all Jack. It doesn't matter, 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 or Larry. It's a label.
Yeah, it's all Jack. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all, it's yeah.
So in closing, if you were to give a gift to the people listening, a knowing, a phrase, or something, what would you give if you could give a gift?
I would give them the gift would be to point them to reading Mr. Banks's 6 books twice. I'm famous for that, because the second time through, you will have different eyes and ears than you had the first time. And the third time, you'll have different eyes and ears than you had the second time.
Wonderful.
And the other thing I would encourage them to do is to go to www.sidbanks.com and to watch the Long Beach lectures, which would be 7 15-minute sections, to watch them through twice. And the third thing would be to then, for free, these are all for free, right? Except for the, is to except for the books, certainly, which are inexpensive now and more available because there's been recent printings. And the third thing would be to, and in whatever order wisdom guides them, is to go online and for free, optimally with a missing link at their side, to listen to the missing link for veterans for free. And anybody that can do that with an open mind, because the wisdom that you're looking for is already inside of you. This is true education, 𝗕𝗂𝘁, because the word education, often people think of putting things into people, but its Latin root is to 𝗕𝗓𝘁𝑒𝑟𝑎, is to draw out what's already there.
I love that.
So that's what's beautiful about this, is that it's not like teaching differential calculus. It's about awakening an awareness, a realization that's already there.
Mm.
And that we're the only person that can innocently take us away from it. But if we learn to listen to our mood going down, our tension level going up, our thinking becoming muddled, our relationships starting to be more difficult, and our body feeling some discomfort or sleep, as love letters letting us know that we're off the glide path, then we will be sooner and sooner aware that we're off the glide path, and we'll have a quicker journey back home.
I'm just feeling those words. And yeah, there's nothing to say. Just, I felt all those words. I'm so grateful for your time and your presence. And for people who are watching, you can work with Dr. Bill Pettit too. And I'll put the links in the website. Dr. Bill Pettit is available for mentoring, and he has wonderful online courses on what he's talking about as well.
Well, I'm going to ask you if you would to check with Terry and get, because I do have a course that's starting on September 29th.
Right.
And it'll be fully recorded. So even if the time is not a good time with the time change, it can be watched 20 minutes at a time. It'll be fully recorded. And it's the course number 3 in One Cause, One Cure, Never Broken, Nothing Lacking. It's called Help for the Helpers. And the helpers are not just professionals. They're so often we want to help our sibling, or we want to help our parents or our children or a friend, so, but if people don't understand this, it can be very, they even talk about compassion fatigue as if too much compassion is bad. And it's not too much compassion that causes burnout. It's a lack of understanding. Now, have I sent you that recently published article that we spent 22 months on? If not, I will resend it.
Yes,
because
please.
that's a groundbreaking. Jack Pransky, myself, Tom Kelly, and Judy Sedgman collaborated for 22 months to write that article in response to an article by people called 𝗕𝗶𝗹𝗹 and Moffat, which for the first time professionals said there is one factor behind all mental illness. And that one factor is chronic mental stress. And the antidote and the cure is an understanding of what's behind creation of the universe and of our personal experience. In fact, what we call factor U. And that's what we've been talking about today. Factor U is just a label of what we've been pointing to today.
It's epic. I can't wait to read it. And I'm just so grateful that you're here. That's all I have. Like, I'm just grateful, and I'm grateful that we were able to record this conversation for everybody to experience, and hopefully it will help them on their journey with their mental health and getting pointed to all the right resources. That's just life-changing. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna stop recording, and thank you so much.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to mention your friend. I mean, my friend, Dr. 𝗕𝗶𝗁𝗁.
Right, 𝗕𝗶𝗁, right. So if anybody watching and you know Dr. Bill Pettit's friend, you have to say the name.
Anand, is it ANUN or AN?
So ANAN, Anand. Yeah,
Anand 𝗕𝗶𝗁. Yeah, and Anand was wow, he was a mentor to me over 50 years ago. He was a year ahead of me, and when we spent 2 years in surgery, sometimes being on 96 out of 108 hours twice a month, or 36 out of 48 routinely. And he knew something about life, because I spent nights with him where we were on for 36 hours treating seriously injured people at a big hospital in Chicago. And I never once in the 2 years I was with him saw him lose his bearings. So he knew something.
He knew something.
And Sid says that, listen, truth has been around since the beginning. This is not new. This is just maybe one of the better ways to point to what's been there all along.
So if you're watching this and you know of Dr. Pettit's friend, please comment below or send an email or something, and we're going to reconnect Dr. Pettit with his friend. That would be highly appreciated.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. All right. I'm wishing you just grace and kindness and gentleness and energy to keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And I wish the same for you. And
thank you.
And remember, gentleness starts at home.
Oh, I love that. Quotable. Gentleness starts at home.
Gentleness starts at home. Charity starts at home. That's why Sid said, Nikan, the most selfless, loving thing you can do is to be selfish about getting peace of mind. Selfless. I don't know if you
that relates on so many levels, that I think especially for helpers who are you just want to give. Yeah.
But giving from an empty basket is really hard.
It is hard.
I did it, tried to do it for many years as best as I could. You can only give what you have.
I love that.
So I'll say it again, Sid, and I believe it's just true. Being selfish about getting peace of mind is the most selfless, loving thing you can do, because then your basket is full. And you've got a lot to give.
I'm gonna put that on a sticky note and remind it wherever I go.
There you go.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording. This was lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. Pettit.
Okay, Nikan.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you go by, I see in parentheses, James?
So in Thailand, we have nicknames, right? So like we have the long, so Nikon's my Thai name, and then James is the Thai nickname. And so when I would go to America, I'd be like Nikon, I'm like James, like, okay, we know how to say that. I'm like, okay.
Oh, so they call you James in America? And
Thailand sometimes. It's like, because we call each other our nicknames, because our Thai names are so we use our Thai names for formalities. And it's like, oh, I have friends who name are like Game, Poop, like they're really short, cute names, but our real names are like long.
So do you have siblings?
Well, let me stop the recording first. But anyways, all right. Thank you, everybody. See you later.